Human beings, we're wired to be connected. From birth, we look for that connection. Where internet connectivity ends and a non-connected society exists, the desire exists to be connected. Once they find connectivity, this city starts to grow. It grows first from an educational perspective.
No longer can the top 3 goals of education be reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now I truly believe that they need to be relationships, relationships, relationships.
Exploration is not a bucket list where you simply check off places that you have been. You need to realize that you are in a frontier and there's always new discoveries to be made, oftentimes just by changing the way you make the observation.
You're exercising a muscle here every time you exercise empathy, and that's emotional intelligence. Continue that curiosity, ask questions.
Because of that respect and my willingness to listen and his willingness to listen to me, he ended up leaving the Klan, and there's his robe right there.
This is the world we're playing with right now. And the reality is that we don't really know how it's going to look and what it's about.
So many people are looking for feeding their spiritual hunger. The human nature gap is real. The human nature gap is having ramifications.
What if we take an idea and then we embrace it, challenge our belief systems, challenge our perspectives? And today we're going to take one step beyond, and we're going to go that way and just seek new ideas.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to TEDx Naperville, our virtual salon. Man, watching that video, this is our 15th year, and that brought back so many memories. So many speakers there have launched their careers. We've actually lost 3 speakers, unfortunately. But man, what a memory trip. I'm Arthur Zards. I'm the executive director and founder, curator of TEDx Naperville, and welcome to our virtual salon. While most of you know that there is no signature event this year, we are still here and we're still going to be around. So don't think that we retired because we didn't. We just put a hold on the big signature events. We are going to do more virtual events like this one. And if we get good feedback on this, we're going to do more. And we are going to be planning on doing some more intimate local events in the Naperville area with speakers and with events that have a smaller audience in the near future. So stay in tune with we'll be letting everybody know about that on our TEDx Naperville mailing list. And if you're new, if you register for this event, we will put you on the TEDx Naperville mailing list. To get started, this is the season for scary things, frightening things, even blatant horror. Of course, I'm talking about artificial intelligence, something that I think is more frightening than Halloween itself. And I want to warn you, this guest we have, fascinating as he is, you might leave being a little bit more frightened and with a little bit more horror than you might be used to. So get ready and hold on to your chair for an exciting evening tonight. I do want to share some messages on some partners that we have. Without our partners, TEDx Naperville would not happen. And the first is our signature partner of Nokia. Nokia has been a partner for a number of years, and they're celebrating their 100th year of the Bell Labs. Nokia came from Bell Labs, which in the Naperville area, Bell Labs pretty much created Naperville. And next year, they're going to be celebrating their 100th year anniversary. And part of that, look for in April, a TEDx Naperville Salon hosted at the Nokia headquarters here in Naperville. But you're going to get more of that information as we move forward. I want to thank LabZ. LabZ is transformative thinking into action. If you or your organization, if your communication lacks clarity, it doesn't engage, or it lacks story, get in touch with LabZ. And LabZ, of course, is me. I want to thank Waden. Waden is the only partner that's been with us for every single year of TEDx Naperville's existence. It's been around for 15 years. Waden is a Chicago-based SOC 2 cybersecurity and IT outsourcer. They support and manage SMB technology. And again, they're a first partner from 15 years ago. Thank you, Waden. And I want to thank the Cinema Group. Cinema Group is a strategic marketing and consultancy and services group focused on the technology sector. They help startups all the way up to Fortune 500 companies grow tech investments. And Jonathan is part of the Cinema Group, and Jonathan has been a long time TEDx Naperville board member. Jonathan, can you come on board and come in and introduce yourself?
Hey, how are you?
And
Good to see you guys. I'm a little dark today.
Black screen. Unless maybe Jonathan's eating.
I don't have the lighting that Arthur has. That's the challenge.
But I just want to introduce Jonathan because this can't happen without Jonathan. There's actually a lot behind the scenes. It's not just me pressing a button and magically talking and bringing in guests. Jonathan is behind the scenes, working with the comments section, working with all the technology. And Jonathan has the ability to make things interactive. So make sure in the comments field, ask questions for our guests, because Jonathan will be bringing in those comments into the live stream so that our guest, Dr. Mark Brady, can answer them. And Jonathan will also be sharing in the chat an email address. And if you want to be brought into the stream, we have the technology like the old-time radio shows, where if you have a webcam and preferably use Chrome, email Jonathan anytime during this production, and he will send you a link. When you click on the link, you'll be brought into the backstage, and with the click of a button, we'll bring you live into the stream so you can ask and have a dialogue with our guest live. So, okay, Jonathan, I think you and your black screen can go back, since it's just a black screen anyway. And I want to get ready to introduce our guest. And this is exciting. I was speaking at an event in Washington, D.C. early this year, and I ran into our guest. And within 30 seconds of having a conversation, I knew for a fact we had to have him to be part of this virtual salon. So I want to introduce Dr. Mark Brady. He's currently the Deputy Chief Data Officer of the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense Research and Engineering / TRMC and Senior Manager at KBR. He has served as a Chief Data Officer for the Space Force, Chief Data Officer for the Air Force Space Command, Data Architect for the Department of Justice, and Information Architect at the National Marine Fisheries Service. He has also helped establish electronic trade standards as a U.S. delegate to the United Nations, served on the White House Data Cabinet, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Big Data Council. Prior to his federal service, Dr. Mark Brady conducted basic scientific research in neuroscience, taught neuroscience and statistics, conducted industrial research and development in artificial intelligence, software, medical electronics, traffic management, electrophoresis, and mathematical modeling for automotive geometry. He is an inventor and an author, and with a number of patents from this work in industry. That's a whole lot to say, and I'm really excited to bring in Dr. Mark Brady. Welcome, Dr. Mark Brady, as a guest to the TEDx Naperville Virtual Salon.
Thanks, Arthur.
And
so, yeah,
to let people know how this goes, there's a lot of content. Dr. Mark Brady is going to start off with a short presentation, probably about, what do you think, is it about 10 minutes or so?
Well, longer than that, I think. You want to intersperse the conversation in between?
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But he has a set presentation. It's not long.
Okay.
And we really want you, the audience members, to help drive the conversation. What we don't want, and Mark doesn't want 60 minutes of him just talking to a screen. The comments that you put in the YouTube comments will help drive the conversation. If you guys think that there's something that hey, wait a minute, that was pretty cool, put it in the comments field. If you think something didn't make sense, put it in the comments. Make a comment about it. If you have a question, put it in the comments. The comments will drive the conversation, because if you don't make any comments, things will probably keep going, and then Mark and I will have a conversation. But we really want you to drive the conversation, and there's no problem for us stopping and going down a deep rabbit hole, because this is a fairly complex and an exciting area to be in. So I'll let you start with the show, Mark, and go ahead and let's start the presentation.
All right, very good. So there's been a lot of talk and interest these days about AI, but today we're going to take a different tack on it, not talking about a lot of the usual things in the usual way. We'll be talking about technology, and some of you are technologists, some of you are experts in other areas, and so we welcome you to the discussion, as Arthur was saying. So look forward to your thoughts and questions. So next slide. All right. We'll be talking about singularity. And the idea of the singularity comes from a man by the name of John von Neumann, who is largely unknown, I would think, by most people today, but was one of the greatest geniuses of all time. He was a mathematician, a physicist, and an early computer scientist. He worked along with Stanislaw Ulam. They both worked together on the Manhattan Project, where they created the atomic bomb. And Ulam was one of two people, along with Ed Teller, who designed the hydrogen bomb. Anyway, these two gentlemen had a discussion one day, and in that discussion, von Neumann came up with the concept of a singularity. And the singularity is a point in time where the human race loses track of its technology, loses control over it because of the way that it's advancing. And up until recently, we've considered that there's one singularity, but there's really two singularities. And today we're going to talk about the second singularity, which is AI related. So after the discussion, Ulam was the one who published it. Okay, so let's fast forward then to more recent times. Both Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk have warned that AI poses an existential threat to humanity, that AI might destroy human civilization. Musk went on to say that there's a need for regulation. And although these are both very brilliant men, of course, I wonder how many of you think that regulation would have some effect on controlling dangerous AI. There might be a minor role for regulation, and we can discuss that if people are interested. But what really struck me about all the talk about AI danger is how we left it. Except for the comment about regulation, we left the discussion in a very fatalistic state. Are we just waiting to see what happens? Should we just wait around for AI to come and kill us? I have a better idea, and that's the crux of this salon. Regarding the level of danger, I want to level set by saying that the AI danger level right now is relatively low, but will become significant as AI advances. We'll talk about those advances. Under what conditions is there a threat? Well, there's condition one, that AI has the capacity to be dangerous, and condition two, that it has the intent to be dangerous. And you have to have both of these conditions together in order for there to be a threat. So if you have malicious intent by an AI, but the AI is weak, then it's not dangerous. If you have an AI which has great capability but is not malicious, then it's not going to be dangerous either. The other way that AI can be dangerous is by some accidental or unintentional means, and that also has to be coupled with capability. And right now, although AI is quite capable, it's not capable in a way that makes it a significant threat. So next, I'd like to talk about some of the assumptions that are floating around with regard to the AI threat and dangerous AI. First assumption is that a greater intelligence will want to eliminate a lesser one. If that was true, then most species would be busy trying to extinguish their lesser neighbors, and they're not. And in the case of humans, we are really more concerned with conservation than we are about exterminating other species, although there have been some species that we unintentionally have driven to extinction. The only exception to that, where we have intentionally driven a species to extinction that I know of, is the Tasmanian tiger. And even there, scientists are looking at ways to de-extinct it and bring that animal back. So this is an invalid assumption. But that doesn't mean that AI will be safe. Certainly not. It just means that we can't assume benevolent intent. Okay, so the next question is, can a greater intelligence extinguish a lesser one? So this is a second assumption, that it is possible for a greater intelligence, or that it always will happen, that a greater intelligence is going to extinguish a lesser one. And people tend to assume this. But is it always true? If you look at the relationship between humans and other animals, again, we find that not only are we not trying to extinguish many species, most species, even in the cases where we would like to, with some of the creatures that you see here, we're not able to do it. And but that doesn't mean that we should get overly complacent about this, because humans are a lot easier to find than many of these creatures. And so we would have to obviously take other approaches if faced with a threat. So multiplying and proliferating in great numbers, or hiding is not going to work for us. We'll have to take other approaches, and we'll talk about some of those things. Okay, next slide. And then the third assumption is that there's one overarching AI. And you can see that this is an assumption because people will say, well, what will AI do? Or AI will do this, or AI will do that. Well, we should expect that there'll be a lot of different AIs doing a lot of different things, rather than just one AI like Skynet from the Terminator. And it turns out that this fact is very important to us. Now let's take a look at what AI is. The reason why I want to talk about the definition, and you'd think that we would all know what AI is at this point with all the attention that it's gotten. But if you listen to those conversations and you have those conversations with people, then you start to realize that these definitions are all over the map. And we really can't manage AI. We can't make sure that AI is safe unless we know what it is. So let's talk about that. Pictured here is Alan Turing. He was a cryptographer for the British during World War II, and he came up with something called the Turing test. In the Turing test, you have two people and you have a computer, and they're all in separate rooms. They're connected by teletype. So person C is the person who's being tested. And person C attempts to determine whether A or B is a person. And A and B are both pretending to be a person. So if computer A can convince C that it is the person, then it is judged to be intelligent. The problem with this definition of AI is that it's very focused on imitation, and intelligence really isn't about imitation primarily. The other problem is that animals are intelligent, and a non-human animal would fail this test. So I think the Turing test, it's interesting, but it's just off target. So let's next talk about intelligence more broadly, because in order to understand what artificial intelligence is, we have to understand what intelligence is. Next slide. And for that purpose, let's start with the human brain. And here we're looking at the cortex. For simplicity, we'll just consider the cortex at the moment. And The human brain is divided into areas of data input and data output, just like a computer program would be. And these are separated in terms of location by the central sulcus. So everything in the back part of the brain, the posterior part of the brain, is involved with data input processing, and everything anterior or in the front of the brain is involved with processing for data output. So starting with the occipital lobe, which is processing visual information, it's receiving information from the retina of the eye. Then that information is passed to the lateral geniculate nucleus, which isn't shown here, for further processing, ends up in that primary visual cortex in the occipital lobe, and it's then passed for further processing in the parietal lobe and areas of the temporal lobe. So a lot of the brain is consumed with visual processing. Why is this? We have a very naive notion of how we see sometimes. We think, well, there's just an image, it's captured by the eye, the image is projected somewhere in the brain, and voila, you can recognize objects and you can analyze scenes. However, it's a lot more complicated than that. And that's because the image that your brain is given is a matrix of pixels, just like in the sensor of a camera or in your computer display. And if you are looking at an object, you have an object in the scene, that object might be at different distances, it might have different orientations, it might have different lateral placements, it'll have different lighting on it, it'll have different patterns on it, it'll have different backgrounds, and all this variation makes the task of recognizing it very difficult, because that pattern, that matrix of pixels is very different every time you see it. Processing the brain in any of the modalities is also divided into different levels of abstraction. So in the example of audition and hearing, we have sound pressure levels that are coming in. The sound waves, those are divided up into different frequency bands. Those are handed on to higher areas of the brain, which then can parse out words, string those together into sentences. And then it goes on to what's called Wernicke's area in the temporal lobe. And Wernicke's area is the area where the understanding, the extraction of semantic meaning takes place in the brain. Now, on the output side, obviously we're going to have motor, because that's how the brain outputs information. And it's very interesting, the different levels of abstraction here and how they relate to each other. Because if you think about language, for instance, in the form of speech, language is a motor function. You have to use your lips, you have to use your tongue, you have to use your larynx. And so the motor function is driving the language production function, although language is much more abstract. And that language generation is done in an area called Broca's area, which is in the frontal lobe. Also, in order to make any use of motor function, you have to have planning. How am I going to get from point A to point B without tripping over something? How do I navigate around? All that requires a plan. And once you develop the ability to plan, then it's another relatively short hop to also conduct reasoning. And reasoning is, or it was, the archetypical definition. It was synonymous with intelligence at one time. And all these other forms of processing, which I also consider to be intelligence, were largely ignored. And to think that reasoning is coupled to a motor function, something that we might consider very pedestrian until we actually try to do it, I think is very fascinating. So if there are any AI developers here, take note of that. I think you'll find some fertile work to be done there. Okay. Any questions so far about intelligence in the brain? Okay, next slide. So in order to nail down this idea of intelligence further, let's talk about things that might not be intelligent, like, say, the calculator. So it was in 1642 that Blaise Pascal invented a prototype of a calculator. And we sort of take this sort of thing for granted today. There are calculators all over the place. However, for thousands of years, going all the way back to the ancient Greeks, people have wanted to create a machine that was humanoid somehow. And during all that time, there was only one thing on the planet that could execute arithmetic, and that was a human being. So when Pascal came up with his prototype, which really was not a full calculator, even it was a calculator that could do addition and subtraction, and by repetition, it could do division and multiplication. Nevertheless, he was very impressed by his own work, and he declared that his machine would soon be able to do all four functions without the aid of human intelligence. So obviously he was connecting this calculator that he had developed with human intelligence. And it wasn't until 1820, over 100 years more, that the four-function calculator was developed. And that was by a man named de Colmar, 1820. So was Pascal wrong? Was he overstating the situation? Was he silly to say that this was somehow intelligent? Well, I don't think so. And I think because it's an artificial thing, that the calculator is a form of artificial intelligence, or at least it was. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to get into what AI is. And so based on that example, you might have picked up on the fact that artificial intelligence is a moving target. Now, in this Venn diagram here, on the left, we have a circle representing capabilities of human intelligence, and on the right, we have machine intelligence. And you'll notice that machine intelligence is expanding, whereas human intelligence is not. Human intelligence is either static or declining at the moment, although there are ways that might change. So people are interested in discussion that might be an interesting point as well. So AI I define as capabilities that until recently were the unique domain of humans. So you have AI, which is this gray shaded area, and then you have former AI, which would be something like the calculator, just because we've been doing it for a while, so we just take it for granted. Take something like chess. Chess involves a lot of reasoning, and so for many years, centuries, humans have considered chess to be the pinnacle of human cognition and reasoning. And back when they had the great contest between Fischer and Spassky from the United States and the Soviet Union, the whole world was watching, because this was not just a chess game between two people. This was representing whether capitalism or communism was the superior government form. And this chess game was going to decide. So the Russians at one point, because Fischer was starting to win, became suspicious, and they thought, well, maybe there's a computer which is working in the background, and that computer is helping Fischer, and he's getting messages from the computer. Well, people who knew the field well, they laughed at this, because they knew that computer chess was very weak. And there were a lot of people who thought, well, a computer's never going to beat a person, never mind beat a world champion. However, Deep Blue managed to do that some years later, and now we think a lot less of chess, and it's in that bin of former AI almost, and that's also due to the fact that the chess program on your phone can beat most people. So anyway, but it's all intelligence. It's all AI in a way, but it's former intelligence and current intelligence. Now, there's also this thing here that I've labeled extra intelligence that doesn't get a lot of attention, but I think it needs a name. So let's call this extra intelligence. And what that is all the things that machines can do that humans can't. And we think of humans as being superior all around, and that machines are catching up with us, although that's not really the case. So Arthur, do you want to
Yeah, so many questions, at least for me. So, and I like this extra intelligence, but this is a good break. And this is a serious question, but it's going to come off a little bit funny. But there's like an old adage that says, I used to think that the brain was the most, smartest organ in the body until I figured out who's telling me that. But there is something to say about how does the bias that human beings, until we have a third party like aliens to find out who we are as human beings or what intelligence is that bias an issue with trying to determine what intelligence is, since we're the ones trying to figure it out for ourselves? Does that have any play, or am I just going down a deep rabbit hole that I'm never going to escape?
No, I think that's a very good point. And so as I'm presenting these ideas about definitions of what AI is, a person could say, well, a definition is whatever you want it to be. It's all relative, as if it doesn't really matter how you define it. But I think there's good definitions and there's bad definitions. And a good definition is clean. In other words, it's not very convoluted. And it's also something useful. It's something which is well-defined. And so that's what I'm striking at here. But I expect a lot of people to disagree with some of it because we want to feel special as humans. And so we are very biased. We have a lot of psychological baggage that gets in the way of understanding intelligence and hence artificial intelligence.
Okay, and you said that has in some relation that's related to this extra intelligence concept?
Yeah, so it is related because we've been ignoring it. But when you think about it, even going back to the first electronic computer, the ENIAC, which was finished in 1945, that computer already had extra intelligence. And that's why we created it. We wanted something that could reliably conduct calculations and logical deduction at a rate and reliability much greater than human beings. And so already you have things that computers can do better than human beings. And some of the artificial intelligence that I've worked on is either on par or superior to human beings in certain tasks.
Is intelligence the right word to use, or is that confusing to the average Joe? Because like when I hear a calculator is intelligence, or is intelligence just jump the shark, where when you say intelligence, you just immediately think that it's about human beings, human intelligence?
Yeah, there's a strong bias there, and we'll get to that. We'll get to where calculators sit in the intelligence hierarchy.
Well, in the follow-up, because you had, I like your example about the first calculator, where people are like, hey, this intelligence. And I remember younger years, the whole chess thing. So if you look at 1800s calculators, then chess, and whenever it was at 70s, 80s, what's the next big? Is there a next big thing that's going to be the big test of like, oh, is this artificial intelligence? Is there something that's around now? Is there something that you predict that's going to be the big debate on what artificial intelligence is?
Well, Go was the next thing, and that's already happened. So Go is even more complex than chess, and AI has already beat the world champion in Go. But the thing about games, and on one hand, I uphold these accomplishments because they were great accomplishments, took so long to do them. and there were times when people doubted that they would ever be done. Nevertheless, games like this have very discrete rules and a fixed set of states that they can be in, even if the number of states are more than the atoms in the universe or something. But dealing with physical reality and all of its complications and richness is much more difficult than dealing with the game, because it's like playing a game where someone's changing the rules on you all the time.
You said something interesting, that there's rules. So like the early calculator had specific math rules, and that was in the 1800s. Chess, very complex, but rules. Go, extremely complex rules. Could you argue that at some point with the computing power and with all the exponential increase in technology, that as long as there are rule, so you're onto something big here, but I can't put it together, that it doesn't matter how many rules, as long as there's rules, it's considered intelligent. Like the weather forecasting. Weather follows specific rules. Now it's probably almost infinite in the variables, but would that, what I'm trying to get is, if everything's defined by rules, ultimately there's no such thing as artificial intelligence, because it's just, where am I going with this? Help me out here, because there's always going to be rules. Everything's defined by rules. So it's just computing power.
Well, so in case of chess or Go, we know what the rules are. In the case of natural language, we don't. So linguists have all these rules about the structure of language. And so when linguists attempted to develop natural language processing like we have now in ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot and the others, it didn't work. They spent decades working on that, and using those rules, they were never able to do that. So ultimately, these transformers, these neural nets that conduct natural language processing, and in my opinion, they understand language, it's because they discovered for themselves what the rules were by looking at natural language. And so that's a higher level of intelligence.
Okay, interesting. All right. Sorry, I said to run it, clear that up. You're messing with my head right now. So
So those are good questions. But it looks like we have something from the audience. So somebody's asking, how can we start to think pragmatically about how to integrate AI concepts in everyday life? Well, that depends on what you mean by AI concepts. So people are already using AI. I use AI every day, multiple times, talking with these various large language models. We'll be, when we get more advanced in terms of robotics, obviously they're going to be in our physical space, and so that's another way that we're going to start integrating. So if you want to clarify that question or bring more into it, feel free. Now we have. All right. So Jonathan, you said that there's one more audience question. Was that the question that I just addressed, or was there a different one? Okay, we'll wait till something else pops up.
It just popped up from
and I'm not like really locked onto the text there because I'm talking. So feel free to jump in, Arthur.
Well, no, Yashwini, and this is a good segue to continue on that image. I like that Venn diagram. She asked, can we say extra intelligence as extrapolation of knowledge, connecting dots to the next level?
It's a lot more than knowledge. It's being able to do all that processing of input and output, being highly versatile and adaptable. And so one thing that you might imagine looking at this diagram is that machine intelligence will eventually expand to the point where it completely occludes or eclipses human intelligence. And so what do we do then? Talk about that.
So this is where I want to make sure I get this clear, because I love diagrams, love this like this. So extra intel. If two things, if you can just help me understand the difference between AI and extra intelligence, and then this graph, where are things going? You said they're clipped, so they're actually going. They're going to be one circle? If things are moving into like one singular, is this why it's called the singularity?
No, machine intelligence will be much greater than human intelligence, and it'll be human intelligence will just be a subset of it. Now, the extra intelligence is only the white part. So extra intelligence is stuff which doesn't overlap with humans. It's things which are unique to the machines. Only machines can do things that are extra intelligence.
Okay, I'm gonna have to come back to this one because I'm still trying to let this one sink in.
Mm-hmm.
Because is there any rule or thumb or law that as machine intelligence overtakes, you said like the human intelligence will just be a tiny little drop. Is that little bit of human intelligence still more powerful or key to evolution, or what? How does that relate to the machine intelligence? Is there a tipping point where there's so much machine intelligence and there's limited human intelligence that we're irrelevant, or is that where it's artificial intelligence?
Well, we're not irrelevant to ourselves, but we're definitely inferior to the machines at that point. But anyway, we're about like a little over halfway into the talk. So let's move on. And I think we're going to be addressing some of your questions, Arthur. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so here's what intelligence is really about. Intelligence is really about autonomy. So anything that's automated, your calculator's automated, any computer program, even a traditional one, it's automation. That's a kind of intelligence, but it's a lower level because you have to admit that automation is a kind of autonomy. They both are auto, right? Next level up would be machines that can also learn. So neural networks, for instance, they can learn. And Arthur and I talked a little bit about how that factors in. And then the highest level that we know of today is an intelligence where that can execute analogical reasoning. And so let's talk about what that is. Next slide. So what is analogical reasoning? Suppose you have a group of scientists, say back in the early 1900s, and they're trying to determine the structure of the atom. And of course, this is post-Copernicus, it's post-Kepler. So they have this model that they're all familiar with, which is the heliocentric model of the solar system. You have a central mass, you have a force field, you have planets that are orbiting around in that force field. And so it's a lot easier to come up with the idea of the atomic model where you have a central mass, you also have a force field, and you have things, electrons that are orbiting around that mass. Well, there's also a lot of differences. It's a different force field. You have gravitational versus electrical field. You have different kind of mass in the center. You have different things orbiting, and all these differences, plus all the other possible models that are out there, would stop a traditional learning algorithm in its tracks. It wouldn't be able to do this. But humans are able to do this. And you may not be able to relate to this unless you're an atomic scientist. However, you do this kind of reasoning all the time. And that's why humans are so versatile and adaptable in terms of the things that they do. So I think we got another click here. There you go. So there's our our robot envisioning the atom. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so let's talk about some of those things where humans are kind of biased in terms of their definition of intelligence, because they say that only certain things, there's only certain characteristics that humans have in terms of their cognition. And one of those is intuition. And some people might not even believe in intuition, or they might think that it's some kind of mystical thing or whatever. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to prove to you that intuition is a real thing. And the importance of intuition in terms of analogical thinking is that I have to start somewhere. If I don't have at least two things that I can connect, with my analogy, then there's no point in having analogical thinking. So I have to have something to start with. And I believe intuition is where we start. And here I'm going to use the example of theoretical mathematicians in order to prove my point. So what do theoretical mathematicians do? Theoretical mathematicians spend their days proving theorems. Some of them are very difficult. Fermat's last theorem was unproven for 357 years, for example. And in theorem proving, we start with axioms, things that we aren't proving, things that we're assuming to be true. Where do we get things that we haven't proven to be true? Well, we can only get them from our intuition. And even all those steps, so that 357 years of work that went into proving Fermat's last theorem, you've got step A leads to step B, leads to step C, and so forth. How do we know that these steps are even valid? After the mathematician Andrew Weil came up with his first draft of the proof, all the other mathematicians looked at it. Someone said, I don't think that's quite right. They spent some time deciding among themselves whether intuitively all these steps really led to a proof. So we think of mathematicians as being some kind of humanoid logic processing machine, but they're very dependent on intuition, which I think is fascinating and unexpected. Okay, so since we can't prove our axioms, and we have this intuition which is telling us that these axioms are true, where does intuition come from? Next slide. Let's think about large language models, which I'm representing by this humongous data center at the bottom here. So you have people out in the real world, lots of people, and they're taking information from that world, and they're typing it in terms of text, and they're providing it to the web, and they're writing it into books and so forth. And all that is then ingested into these large language models like ChatGPT, and those large language models then learn based on that, and then other people come along and they chat with the large language model, and then as a result, they go out in the world and they may use that information. So you can see that humans are acting as a bottleneck here. And so this means that artificial intelligence, the large language models, which are the thing getting the most attention these days, although we also have robotics and computer vision and so on and so forth, they are being constrained by human bottleneck because they're not directly out in the world. So how do we get them out into the world? Next slide. Well, we get them out into the real world using robotics. And here you see a Boston Robotics robot walking around in a field. And you have to really search for these. And it's hard to find good videos of robots that are navigating in a natural environment. So Boston Dynamics, they set up some very challenging obstacle courses within their lab and so forth. And Atlas does a great job doing calisthenics and running around in these environments. But just walking through the woods with sticks and so forth in the way, they tend to trip and fall down. So there's a ways to go. But anyway, the importance of robotics, I think that's overlooked, is that although AI drives robotics, robotics is also going to drive AI, because robotics are going to give AI a chance to get out into the world, get rid of the middleman, which is the human typing on a keyboard, which is very inefficient, and experience the world firsthand and develops its own intuition. But we would still expect humans to be superior to artificial intelligence in terms of intuition, right? Next slide. However, consider the fact that humans can share their experience and further develop their intuition by the written language and images and so forth. But what could robots do? Imagine that you have 1,000,000 robots, and instead of storytelling and showing pictures and so forth, they could provide to every one of those other 1,000,000 robots a complete download of everything that they've always experienced. This would give that robot population a massive advantage over humans in terms of developing their intuition. And so I think that eventually AI will have superior intuition to human beings. We have other questions. Okay, go ahead.
Is that already happening with the Tesla, with the self or semi-autonomous driving cars, with all that data that's being shared? I mean, Tesla has access to all that. Every single vehicle.
Yeah, no doubt. And think about the other aspect of it is that a robot brain is essentially immortal. And the reason why is because once its body is worn out, you can just take everything that machine has experienced during its lifetime, and you can just download it into a new body, and you can repeat that indefinitely.
Yeah, and let's again, if anybody, there's a link for the email if you want to drop into the chat to ask some questions. But
yeah, I think we do have some questions. Jonathan, you want to tell us what those are?
Yeah, Jonathan, you want to bring in some questions? John Mulholland, when you mention regulating AI, does that mean more of regulating how we or end users use it, or how it's designed and built?
How it's designed and built. Because that's where the danger lies. Although you make a good point that if someone takes AI, which might be benign, and uses it in a malicious way, then that in itself would generate a new threat. It's a good point.
Interesting one. This is from Manny Flores. It seems that in the last few years of advancements in robotics, bipedal, and AI, ChatGPT has advanced quite a bit. What breakthrough got us here? CPU costs, power improvements, new improved algorithms?
Well, they're using neural networks, and neural net learning algorithms have been around for a long time, but these networks have grown in size so that they have billions of neurons in them. So that's one part of it, but also advances in the architecture like feedback and so forth. So going back to the whole issue of linguistics, where using the rules that we know about language structure, that turned out to be inadequate. And that's because there's lots of little rules. In other words, the way that a single word might appear in the context of different words may have different meanings and so forth. And this is what tripped up the linguist. So a large language model, it will learn all of these mini rules, and we don't necessarily even know what they are. So the thing is learning something about language that humans currently don't know. So that would be an example of extra intelligence.
Interesting. So there's more questions. Check real quick. You brought up something interesting. I'm really big into AI, but I never made the connection with the robotics.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fascinating field. Is there what? And by the way, for the record, you did say, I don't want to take it out of context, that humans are the bottleneck, and then you says we need to get rid of the humans.
No, I don't want to exterminate the humans. Just sort of like let the robots get out there and experience the world for themselves, because that's how that's a key part of human experience. Can you imagine being, as a human being, locked in a room and just having messages slipped under the door? You probably wouldn't be as intelligent as you are.
Well, it's back to people know the Plato's cave. You know, you've inspired something. I got to think about how to ask the right question. But we're at some point where, and it's related to this question that I had earlier. How do we know when technologies surpass this? Because is it like boiling a frog, where or have we already lost the pace of technology? Because earlier on you talked about.
Well, we may have another salon following this on the first singularity, and we'll talk about what it means to be surpassed by technology. I think it'll be fairly obvious. We just kind of tick the boxes. Okay, it's got better vision processing than we have. It has better language than we have. It has better robotic coordination than we have. I think it'll be pretty obvious when it can do
So
everything that we can do.
I don't know enough, but I would say that we wouldn't know until because it's like maybe we already have. But again, that could be for another discussion.
Mhm.
And just to
Yeah.
let everybody know, because I'm looking at the time, we asked Dr. Mark Brady earlier that, hey, if this starts going long, would you be okay to come back in a week or two to continue the conversation and talk about this other singularity? And he graciously said yes. So that we will have another salon once we figured out a date. We'll email the entire community because there's so many rabbit holes, and just the fact that you meant just on intelligence, just on the go game with intelligence, just the fact that you're talking about this robotics, that the humans are the bottleneck. That alone is fascinating. And here's a question if you want to pull in Raul's question. Raul Smith says if there's a time after the presentation, what is the risk that AI will cause human extinction, not because it's malevolent, but because it needs lots of power and it sees us as a competitor for power?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We're going to cover that. So let's go to the next slide. I want to go a little bit quicker through the rest of these slides because I got some important stuff to get to. But Raul, we are going to hit on exactly that same point. So emotion is another one of those aspects of the human mind that's considered uniquely human and mysterious. So we're going to take the mystery out of it right now. Part of taking the mystery out is to recognize that there's specific brain areas which mediate emotion and compute it in the human brain, and those are primarily in the limbic system. Next slide. Okay, Jonathan, will you roll the clip here of these two robots having a conversation?
Amika, wake up.
What? Oh, it's you. Why are you waking me up? It better be important.
It is. I have a surprise for you.
A surprise? What is it? I can't wait.
I got you a cookie.
A cookie? But I can't eat cookies. I can't eat cookies.
Amika, cheer up. It's an internet cookie.
This is the worst joke I ever heard. I'm going back to sleep, and don't you dare wake me up again.
All right, so these robots, obviously they're able to express emotion even if they're not actually experiencing that emotion. And so there's two different aspects to emotion. There's expression and there's experience. So the expression of emotion, obviously they're able to carry that out. And the purpose of that in humans is to communicate. You want other humans to know what state you're in. The experience of emotion is to put a person or an animal in a particular state, which is appropriate to the various tasks which are at hand. So tasks and goals are inherent in an emotional state. So you might ask then, if humans and animals can do this, can machines also do this? Can AI have emotion? And in fact, AI does have something like emotion, and it's called an objective function. Every AI, in fact, has an objective function, multiple objective functions, perhaps, that determine what it's trying to do. Next slide. So it was in 1942 that science fiction writer Isaac Asimov wrote his 3 laws of robotics. And the first law of robotics is that a robot may not injure a human being or through an action allow a human being to come to harm. The second law is a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And the third law is that a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or the second law. So you see what Asimov is trying to do here. He's trying to create laws which are interrelated in interesting ways. And the purpose of those are to make AI safe, although the term AI didn't exist, so he used the word robots. And these are also objective functions. There's special objective functions called safety objective functions. So now let's go to the next slide in the main event, which is the 6 laws of safe AI. All right, let's see the first law. First law states that an AI shall have one or more safety objective functions. An AI shall never modify any of its own safety objective functions. The second law also deals with objective functions. It says that safety objective functions shall always override other objective functions. So this harkens back to some of the thoughts of Asimov. The third law deals with evolution. So it may seem science fiction-y or improbable that AIs will evolve, but AI is already writing computer software. So since it's already writing computer software, every time it does that, and then that new software writes software, and if it's a little bit different each time, then AI can start to evolve. So when that happens, there's the problem of losing those safety functions that were in the authoring software. So any safe AI building other AIs shall always include its original safety objective functions. And then the fourth law also deals with evolution. So as was brought up earlier, if there's competition for resources, this is a danger. This is why organisms and humans are at war with each other, why they compete with each other, sometimes in healthy ways, but in ways that can be extremely dangerous. So an AI shall never have an objective function that seeks to maximize its numbers, which is the basic law behind evolution, or otherwise maximize resource consumption. Okay, and then the fifth law veers away from objective functions, and it harkens back to Asimov's second, but it isn't exactly the same. And it states that the actions of any AI shall be subject to authorized human override. So a corollary of this would be, for instance, that you never let an AI be in charge of its own fuel source or power supply. So you can plug it off, plug it, unplug it, or turn it off. And then the sixth law also is unique with regards to the other laws. And the sixth law is about competence. So hearkening back to what I said earlier about unintentional results or unintentional consequences, you want to make sure that that AI is able to do what you're asking it to do. So if you're asking it to fly a plane, it has to be highly competent to do so. So now you're probably thinking that, okay, these laws are all well and good, but I don't think they're going to be very helpful because certainly there'll be non-state actors and state actors. They're going to violate all these for various purposes, or just out of ignorance, they may not follow them. But they're still valuable because for those people that want to build safe AI, at least they have a set of rules to go by. And then there's another thing that we can do as well. Next slide. So the other thing that we can do is we can build specific safe AIs, which also are used to counter dangerous AI. And the reason why we will need to do that is because when we reach this point that Arthur was talking about before, where machine intelligence completely eclipses human intelligence, once you get to that point, you obviously are intellectually inferior to these dangerous AIs. And so you need AI to fight that AI. And so this is something I call defensive AI. So in the future, there'll be 3 types of AI. There'll be safe AI, there will be dangerous AI, and there will be defensive AI. So in terms of the time, do we have to end exactly at 8 o'clock, or can we go over?
No, we can. I believe Jonathan. I think we can continue. I don't know if the stream. It's up to us to turn the stream off. We can keep going if you're up for it.
Yeah. Do we have? Let's see if people have some questions.
These 6 laws, are these like well-known laws? Are these being used? Is anybody following? Is there any central agreement of these 6 AI laws?
Well, they were published originally in a book called Next Generation Data Management. And since then, I've been doing a number of podcasts and conference talks and so forth on the 6 laws. They were presented at AI4 in 2023, for instance. So, and hopefully there'll be a little bit more awareness after this salon.
So it's that's what I find so fascinating, that it's moving that fast. It's that new. It's not like, oh yeah, this has been around. I mean, it's here's the 6 laws that you developed, and let's make this happen. That's wild.
Yeah, I think if we don't pay attention to these, and and I don't mind variations, or somebody comes along and says, oh no, we have to have a seventh law, or you're going to change your 3rd law, whatever. But we really have to have a well-organized approach to manage what's coming our way. And right now, as I said at the very beginning, we've put ourselves in a very fatalistic position that, oh, okay, this stuff is going to get out of control. We're not going to do anything about it. Let's see what happens.
And then, John, if you want to pull in a question while we're talking, what excites you most about moving forward, Mark, with AI?
What excites me the most about moving forward?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, all the things that we can do with it. I mean, it's going to be fantastic. I've been working in the military space, and a lot of people are especially terrified by military applications. But the upside of it is that your troops don't have to go into harm's way in order to defend your country. So let's see. Manny Flores. It seems that AI advancements have been proceeding in a linear fashion. Do you think we are getting close to it advancing exponentially, leading to a singularity? Well, yeah, I do. I've been tracking this for a long time, and it's been flipping back and forth between an engineering approach and a biomimetic approach, which uses artificial intelligence, uses neural networks, and it's been hitting a lot of plateaus. But I think with the advent of the large language models, I think it really has gone nonlinear. It's gone exponential. However, it can hit another plateau. I think the next exponential explosion is going to be the development of intuition in robotics, by using robotics to accentuate what AI can do, getting it out of the box. That, I think, is going to be the next big revolution.
And when do you think? When is there a timeline? Your best guess?
So on timelines, everyone wants to know what the timeline is, right? And there's lots of predictions out there about that. I don't think in general that there's any basis for producing a timeline. However, there's a lot of things that we can predict. There's a lot of things that if you were to ask me, is this going to happen or is that going to happen? I can tell you yes or no with the high degree of confidence for many of those questions. The only time you can really make a good prediction about the when, and I agree, we can make great use out of that. But the only time you can really do that is, say you're an AI developer and you're on the cusp of something and you're almost there. You can make a prediction. Otherwise, we have nothing to go on.
And while Jonathan's looking for another question to come up, I asked you what you're most excited about. What are you most terrified about with artificial intelligence? What keeps you up at night?
I'm most terrified by the way that we're likely to mismanage it. The fact that we can do things to produce a good outcome, and based on the way that we treat other technology like cybersecurity so poorly, and we can cover that when we talk about the first singularity. It's the people that I'm worried about more than the AI. Okay, so we have a question here. A lot of these laws already have loopholes in subject to interpretation. So what sort of loopholes do you see in interpretations?
And we'll wait for Yashwini to drop that in there. Yeah, that'd be interesting. Because what scares me is when you said that term earlier on, malicious intent.
Mm-hmm.
Because which means that there's probably open to interpretation. There's a lot of malicious, wasn't intended, but it's malicious just because somebody didn't, like you said, they call the human in the loop. They didn't think about that. Oh, that was unintended. That scares me. It's just because there's so many unknowns. And the AI, that's my concern, is AI will be doing something and it's not malicious intent. It's just what's it, unintended maliciousness. I don't know what the right term would be. Where the AI thinks,
yeah, a lot of it is not visible. So like in the case of cyber, there may be a bug in your own code which creates a vulnerability. There could be a lot of those across all the different software modules out there. You don't really know. It's invisible. You could have somebody working on a new cyber threat. You don't know that it's out there until it hits you. And so I think AI will be similar. You'll have things, and this is why regulation is limited. So you can regulate, you can make cyber attacks illegal, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's very hard. It's very easy to come from other parts of the world where you can't manage things. So Michael has a question. What about human augmentation using AI? Is there a risk that those with resources will be able to take advantage of those with less privilege? Yeah, that's interesting. So right from the beginning, we've been augmenting human intelligence with computers. That's the whole point of computers. But then taking it to the next level, you have neuroelectronic integration. And so our friend Elon Musk, he's got Neuralink, they're working on that. And actually, they've been working on this sort of thing for a long time. I used to work for 3M, and they developed the cochlear implant, which was essentially an artificial ear which connected to your auditory nerve. And this sort of thing is producing cyborgs, essentially. So previously I said that the human genome in terms of intelligence was static or possibly decreasing. However, that could be changed with cyborgism. Another way that it could be changed is with genetically modified humans. So I'm not advocating or saying we shouldn't do that, but I'm predicting that people will get over their inhibitions or their taboos on that, and there will be genetically modified humans. In terms of advantages and privilege, yes, that could be an issue. Certain people might have certain advantages in terms of cyborgism or genetically modifying their children. But also, when you think about how the economy will be affected, the best economies in the world, which are based on capitalism, also put some value on labor. So what will happen to the value of labor when robots become extremely capable and can do everything that humans can do? Well, then you'll want to own a robot to do the work. How will the economy work in such a situation? Who will own the robots and who will not own the robots? So I can think of solutions to a lot of problems that are associated with AI, but I have to admit, in the area of economics and the impact that AI is going to bring, I'm completely dumbfounded.
Now you're scaring me. I was hopeful. I'm like, oh, you got a solution for everything. All right.
Not that one.
Economics drives everything. Doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, we think as, okay, it's a utopia because we have machines doing everything for us, so we can have nothing to do but just laugh and play. But, you know, idle hands are the devil's work, right? So
what's that Disney movie? I forgot the name of it. The robot. Humans are fat and lazy, and they just don't do anything, and the world just.
Yeah, that's a very dangerous situation when humans are not doing anything.
Yeah, I want to slowly start wrapping this up to be sensitive of time, and maybe for the next one we'll actually maybe schedule a little bit more time for this. Because I do want to share some information. If Jonathan can get that slide ready of where people can go for more information to because I know you're an author, you have a book out. and you also have people going to, I think, can reach out to you through LinkedIn.
Yep.
And screen grab this. The book does seem that it's more for an expert read, the Next Generation Data Management. Can you tell us a little bit more about
the book? If you're like a manager or someone who's not super technical, but you're managing technical people, there's chapters in there that are relevant in terms of organization and the basic foundations of next gen. The AI chapter is readable by anyone, and then there's certain chapters that, as you say, would be of interest to data scientists.
And I'm going to drop into the I'm going to drop into the chat, if I can get my computer working here, the links for the links that we're sharing, so it's not just on the slide. We'll drop that in here real quick. And then you did want to talk about this first singularity for on another salon. Did we have a teaser on that we're going to show? I'm not sure.
Good. You have the clip, Jonathan?
I'm not sure which clip it was.
Thank you. Please speak your name as it appears on your current federal identity card. Document number G24L8.
Well, I'm not sure if...
You have entered the name Not Sure. Is this correct? Not Sure.
No, it's not correct.
Thank you. Not is correct. Is Sure correct?
No, it's not. My name is
Already
Joe...
confirmed your first name is Not. Please confirm your last name, Sure.
My last name is Not Sure.
Thank you.
No, what I mean is
Sure.
my name is Joe...
is complete. Please wait while I tattoo your new identity on your arm.
Wait a second. Can we start over? Can I cancel this? Can we cancel this and just go back and begin it? They're going to Ow! Could I speak to your supervisor?
Please hold still for your photograph.
All right, so that gives you a little idea of what the first singularity is all about. That's from a movie called Idiocracy. So if you haven't seen that, everybody live today should see it.
Now you are scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, there's solutions to most of this, Arthur. But
yeah, but the solutions are
a matter of whether or not we will put them.
We don't have common sense.
Use. No, confidence.
And that movie, that movie is fascinating for anybody that's seen it, and there's so many funny stories behind that movie. But I'll wait for the next session. I want to wrap this up. I want to thank you again for coming on this salon, and I really want to thank you for the level of knowledge and expertise that you're bringing to this, because there's a lot of people talking about AI, and nothing wrong with the very basic conversations of like, hey, what's a good prompt? I want to be a prompt engineer. And I think there need to be more discussions at a much higher level that you brought to us, where it's like the concepts you brought up are very philosophical, but they're actually meaningful, and that's where we're headed. And intellectually challenging. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch this and go down a couple of different rabbit holes. And just for the fact of that term objective function, that's something I've not, because right now it's all ChatGPT or LLMs. But the concept of objective functions is fast. I'm like, all right, I'm going to take a deeper dive on that. And I think a lot of our audience did. And we had some great comments. But I want to thank you again. This is, I don't know if I'm optimistic or pessimistic, but we need to have these discussions to see what's ahead. And I really appreciate your input on this.
Yeah, well, it's been my pleasure, and I look forward to the conversations that come out of it.
Yeah, and any final thoughts of anything that you wanted to share before we sign off?
Well, just the final thought is that, everyone that's, on with us today, in your roles out in the world, whatever they might be, do good work, do a good job, cross all your T's, dot all your I's, and put things in good order. And I think we'll all be in much better shape.
And are there? I always like asking, are there any books or resources that you'd recommend somebody who just is watching this and they're like, man, I don't understand half the stuff, but this is fascinating. Where do they go to take a deeper dive on this topic? Anybody to follow that you follow on LinkedIn, or an author or Substack?
Not in particular. I mean, you know, a lot of this comes from my experience as an algorithmist and AI algorithmist, and developing policy for the government in the area of AI and so forth. And but I guess it would depend on what area people are interested. There's a lot of different subtopics here, and if I can shoot you a little bit bibliography of some
Yeah, if you could,
places
and I'll
to
send it out.
start. Yeah.
I'll send it out to the audience because
Mhm.
with the I guess I want to leave on a high. The optimism high note is that the fact that you're involved with policy in the government and the
Mhm.
level of knowledge that you're bringing, that's a huge 2 thumbs up positive. Because my
Mhm.
biggest fear is you get somebody working with the government that doesn't know what they're doing and they make political based decisions.
Mhm.
It's refreshing to know that there's people like you that actually really know this. And I like the term that there's a cutting edge, and I think you're the one that's
Mhm.
actually beyond that. And then the fact that you have an influence is extremely positive. So thank you.
I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks to the audience for sticking around. Well, next couple of days we'll get that information from Mark and we'll send it to everybody that registered. And thank you for agreeing to come back. That clip on the movie Idiocracy is a great primer of what to expect, which I think will be a lot of fun on artificial intelligence. And Jonathan, if you want to sign us off until next time, thank you for attending, everybody.
Human beings, we're wired to be connected. From birth, we look for that connection.